Alright, class card review time. This time, Shaman. Shaman is a class that I think has moved up quite a bit because of the elemental synergies that's going on. I don't think that its cards are necessarily that insane, but a lot of its creatures got sort of retconned into being elementals. There's definitely a big elemental attrition-y type thing going on with the neutral set, and I think you've got enough value with your elementals here. And also, very importantly, one of the big things that enables the elemental deck in Arena is I forget the name, the elemental that discovers another elemental when you've played an elemental the previous turn, right? Your dog, I heard you like elementals, so if you played an elemental, you get another elemental, and this guy's an elemental. Yeah, the 5 mana 4/5. That guy's really strong, and if you have a good legendary elemental kind of heading the pack, that's often what's going to be offered to you in your list of choices. And when you're playing a class that isn't one of those, I have a good legendary elemental as my legendary, a lot of time you're being offered Osric, which is not a good elemental, and you're just not getting that insane of value. There's enough kind of bad neutral elementals that you're whiffing on that guy a decent chunk of the time. You're not always getting like Blaze Callers. And so you want some good elemental legendary guy, because the way that the discover an elemental thing works is they you have to discover among your class, but I think they give a bonus to your class. They also give a bonus to legendaries, so you actually see your legendary elementals more often than you would think. Shaman has a really good legendary elemental. We'll get to him later, but it also just has a lot of ways to just incidentally get there with its elemental count, and that's a really big deal as well. So I think Shaman moves up a decent amount. I think that the playstyle changes pretty significantly, though. I remember playing Shaman way back in the day as a very tempo board, capitalizing on a board state type class where you played things like Flame Tongue Totem, right? And the idea was that you just got repeated value out of a Flame Tongue Totem or something along those lines. There are a few cards that support that here, but I think overall you're going to want to play Shaman in a more control-y, attrition manner, and it's going to be very elemental focused. So let's get into the cards and why I think Shaman has moved up some ranks and is sort of in the running for maybe one of these top 3 classes with Air Elemental. Air Elemental is not part of the reason why Shaman is getting there. It's an elemental, and that's nice, but it's still a 2/1 body for 1, and they can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Part of it is really only relevant against Mage, which you're going to see, more than a third of the time that you're in an arena usually, but I don't think it's enough upside. The elemental text is relevant, and if for whatever reason, even though you are Shaman and you have a lot of elementals, you just can't get enough elementals and you drafted the I need an elemental guys, this guy can get there. But I think you pass on this guy more often than not. I think this is like a tier 3-ish type card, maybe lower. Fireplume Harbinger, kind of the same story. 2 mana 1/1, not where you want to be. Battlecry, reduce the cost of elementals in your hand by 1. You might think, we're talking about elemental synergy, and this is really important, right? I mean, this is a great effect if you have a lot of elementals, but how great of an effect is it, right? It's a 2 mana 1/1, not that great. If you reduce the cost of elementals in your hand by 1, that's kind of like getting a mana crystal, right? For each elemental that you reduce it by, but not really. It's a little bit worse. So let's say you reduce the cost of elementals in your hand by 1, and you do that to 2 elementals. This guy is a 0 mana 1/1. So he's a Wisp with Elemental Tribal. Yeah, I'll pass. This guy is not very good. Just because a 2 mana 1/1 isn't doing that much. I don't even get the mana really that turn unless I'm playing the Elementals that turn. You're kind of getting like a coupon, a rebate, right? And you have to cash in your coupon later for the reduced cost of the Elementals. That said, I guess I don't mind this guy if I have to pick him, if I have a bunch of elementals, but yeah, I don't want to pick this guy. This is not good. Hot Spring Guardian, this is good. This is definitely one of the things that I want. The art is a little confusing. I mean, is this guy a water elemental, but he doesn't freeze anything? Anyways, he heals stuff. Okay. Taunt 3/4 or taunt 3 mana 2/4 is already decently strong. If this was just if you took out any one of these 3 lines of text between Taunt, Battlecry, Restore 3 Health, and Elemental, I still would probably play this guy, right? If he wasn't an Elemental, I'd still be taking it for the Taunt and Battlecry, Restore 3 Health. I think I like a 2/4 Taunt more than I like a vanilla 3/3, and Earthen Ring Farseer is not a bad card. The fact this guy is an Elemental, and you're definitely a class that wants to do this Elemental stuff, the fact he has Taunt and restores health, I mean, This guy is just solid. Tier 1. You're going to pick this card almost every time that you see it. It's just really very, very, very strong. Kalamos, this is the guy that really makes the elemental strategy work, in my opinion. These big-time legendary elementals. 8 mana, 7/7 is not impressive, but he has the Battle Cry. If you played an elemental last turn, cast an elemental invocation. The elemental invocations are pretty much useful in every board state. So the 4 elemental invocations, I don't have a slide showing them off, but one of them is deal 6 damage to your opponent, right? Go face, Smork. One of them is restore 12 health to your hero. Survive, great, go long. Another one is deal 3 damage to every one of your opponent's minions. Yeah, that's pretty insane. That's 3/4 of the way to a flame strike, and I only played one extra mana, and I got a 7/7 out of the deal. I'll take it. And then he has fill the board with 1/1s. So he's like a mini Onyxia, but not really that mini because he's still getting all the 1/1s, and he's only he's a 7/7. Onyxia is an 8/8, but she costs 9 mana. Yeah, this guy is good. It's hard to imagine board states in which this guy, if you have the Battle Cry in effect, and I think it's not hard to get there as a shaman. If you have the Battle Cry, this guy does work. Your opponent has a lot of creatures, you wipe his board, right? Opponent has one big creature, fill your board with 1/1s, right? Your opponent, you just need 6 more points to kill him. You need to live, right? I think this guy is relevant in so many situations. He has impact the turn he comes down. Fantastic legendary tier 1. And most importantly, because he's one of these elementals you're going to be able to discover off of your Discover an Elemental guy, it's part of the big payoff for being Shaman and being elementals. Primal Fin Totem. This card's okay. It's like tier 2-ish, tier 3. I mean, I've played against it, and I've always kind of been impressed by how much value it's gotten. It summons like 2 or 3 Murlocs pretty reliably. A lot of the early drops in this format are value creatures, right? It's like a 2/2 that does something when it comes into play or when it dies, or like your early drop is like a 1/1 for 1 that gives you, it recycles itself, gets a card. And in that format, this guy survives a lot. He also survives a lot when there's a lot of taunt in the format, and this is a format with Tar Elementals and things of this sort. Right, this is a good card with Tar Elemental. This good card against Tar Elemental. I'm going to say this is like tier 2. Even at worst case scenario, this guy's kind of like a 2 mana 1/4, right? I think this card is fine. I'm going to pick it up a decent chunk of the time that I see it, and there are better cards than it, but this card's solid. Spirit Echo. This card's interesting. This is like Echo of Medivh, but it costs 1 mana less, which is a very big deal. But it only gives the minions Death Rattle, return this to your hand. So kind of weak to some like bounce effects, weak to silence, weak to like priest stealing your guy type stuff. But usually when you're playing this on a board with like 3 or 4 minions, it's getting really good value. The trick is kind of getting there with getting 3 or 4 minions on the board. I think if you get like 2 minions on the board, this still isn't quite good enough, right? If it's a 3 mana sort of draw 2, I could pass on that. But yeah, I'm just going to say this is like kind of an average to below average card. I'm not going to pick this up very often, like tier 3-ish, maybe even tier 4-ish. I like that it costs less mana than Echo of Medivh, but I think most of the games where you're playing this and getting a lot of value, you're also just winning the game, right? It fits into the strategy that you want to be doing, I guess, is this sort of attrition-y style. But I think it's more tailored to the kind of fill the board with stuff, buff it with Flame Tongue Totems and Bloodlusts and things of the sort and get in there. And I don't think you want to be playing that deck as often, so I'm not as excited about this as I might have been in another time. Pretty average card. I think you pass on this a fair chunk of the time. Stone Sentinel. This guy's sort of a payoff for elementals. He's a good enough payoff for elementals. You're already going to be an elemental, so you don't really mind. I mean, obviously, if this guy is just a 7 mana 4/4, that's bad. 4/4s are things that should be costing 3 or 4 mana, not 7 mana. So the rate on this guy is really bad if you don't have the Battle Cry, but the Battle Cry is pretty easy to turn on, and it's pretty good. You get 2/3 elementals with taunt. There's a lot of AoE damage that does 2 damage. This you're filling your board with guys, but you're kind of avoiding that. You're not just scooping to Primordial Drake or things of this sort. So I like the stat distribution, even though typically you might be worried that you'd get AoE'd by that. I think you're less worried about about it with this guy. And when you're getting that, you're getting, right, you're sort of getting 8, 10 worth of stats for 7 mana. Yeah, this is good. I'm going to pick up this guy reasonably highly. I think that you get there with elementals almost all the time as Shaman. You're going to have enough to turn this guy on and make his battle cry work. And I think as a result, this card is something you're going to estimate pretty highly. Tier 1, maybe top of Tier 2, if not Tier 1. High up there, pick this card. More often than not, definitely. Tidal Surge, this is a common and it's a spell, and that's pretty important because it means the offering rate is going to be pretty high, and this card is kind of meh. It's removal, though, and removal is always pretty solid. I don't think this is like Tier 1-ish, I think this is like Tier 2-ish. But you're going to have one of these in your deck most of the time that you play Shaman. And I think if you play against Shaman, this is a card you want to be kind of playing around whenever possible. Expect them to have a Tidal Surge somewhere in their deck. And you'll have one in your deck if you're a Shaman. But you don't really value your health all that much, right? And 4 damage for 4 mana is, it's not really that great. Yeah, this card's just kind of meh. You'll end up with it in your deck a decent chunk of the time, and not just because you're going to be offered it like twice per draft, but also because it's okay and it's going to be the best option sometimes. But I'm not super excited about this. Volcano, I am super excited about this, and I think this is the card you're going to see. I think I went over this in my preface video. You're going to see this 1.6 times on average per draft, which means you can get 1 or 2 of these in your deck pretty reliably. And yeah, I mean, this is a very powerful effect. Some people are a little bit down on it, but I think you want to be playing a slower attrition style and not just trying to flood the board. And I think this is a card that really does a lot when you are when you're not flooding the board, right? When you're just killing off what your opponent does, play a threat, eventually have more cards than they do, that sort of thing. Play elementals, get more elementals off of those elementals. Because I mean, this card is in a lot of ways like Flame Strike, right? It's hard to imagine where this card does worse than Flame Strike, as long as you're doing it when your side of the board is empty. 15 damage split among your opponent's minions is probably going to kill all of them off a lot of the time. This card also doubles as good single target removal, right? This is a good way to basically kill off your opponent's giant mastodon after they played it. It is a little bit of a non-bo with your hero power because sometimes you're going to have O2s that you just can't trade off right before you play Volcano, but a lot of time this card is going to be very powerful, and I think as I said before, this is a card that really is going to push you to playing more towards that elemental synergy and playing more of a long attrition-y game. It also is kind of nice that this card just randomly hoses Bittertide Hydra. People are going to be playing Bittertide Hydras. It's an epic, but it's a common, it's a neutral, so you're going to see it a decent chunk of the time. And this card does 24 damage to your opponent's face after killing their Bittertide Hydra. Yeah, that's pretty good. I like this card a lot. I value it very highly. I think in part it dictates where you want to be going with Shaman. And I think it's very much elemental focused, very much attrition-y, long game type focused. And there you have it. There's all the Shaman cards. Brief recap: bad, excellent, okay, okay to good, okay to bad, good, passable, very good. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. On to the next class.